Thank you for joining us today for our FTP tutorial on everything you wanted to know about FTP and how to secure it, or peeling the onion of FTP. If you have any questions during our webinar today, please email them to us at ftpsecurityquestions@sdsusa.com. You might be asking yourself, what's up with the onion? Well, one of our customers shared with me recently that the more he looked into FTP and how to secure it, he viewed it as an onion, layer after layer, and the more he peeled the layers back, the smellier it became. Well, our objective is to expose those layers and make them easier to peel. SDS has provided other FTP and Secure FTP webinars in the past, but this one is a bit different. Through numerous conversations, technical discussions, and implementations with customers, we found that people still have a lot of questions, and they wrestle with the various options to secure FTP. We thought a candid tutorial was in order to help answer some of those questions. You know, what options are available? Why all the fuss about MVS dataset support? Is hardware encryption important? Just to name a few. We hope you find this webinar helpful. We're going to begin our program today with a quick introduction of SDS and our team, review data breaches and compliance, then discuss why FTP is vulnerable, and show you the layers of the onion and your options for securing FTP. In addition, we'll share with you the steps to take in making FTP compliant and how SDS can help.
I'd like to first introduce our company and our team. SDS has been a mainframe software provider for nearly 30 years, headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have over 1,000 customers and distributors globally with over 20 mainframe software solutions and customer support that's second to none. Many of you are familiar with our vital signs solutions for the network, along with our security solutions for encryption and protecting your network. SDS is the gold channel partner and distributor for SSH TechTIA-ZOS for secure FTP, along with our vital signs detective for fraud detection.
Joining us today from our SDS team, we have Tim Full, our Technical Services Manager with over 20 years here at SDS, and he has expertise in mainframe computing and all things FTP. Tim is located at our SDS headquarters site in Minneapolis. Colin Vander Ross, some of you have talked with him in the past, our Senior SE in Atlanta. He has over 20 years in IT as a network systems programmer for a large bank and then several years here at SDS. And I'm Deb Hodson, located in Raleigh, with 30 years in IT, having worked at IBM, Candle, and HP, all in sales and consulting positions. Well, we can't talk about FTP and security without looking at recent reports in the news. Data breaches, internal, external, hackers, etc. Almost every day there's a new breach to report about. So everyone is not only interested in plugging the potential security vulnerabilities, but more and more legislation is dictating it. Here are just a few of those mandates that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and one of the reasons you might be joining us today. There are federal mandates with states also enacting their own laws to protect data. What we're also finding in our recent discussions with customers and partners is that it's no longer good enough to just secure FTP. The next level of security is going to be automation, or basically automatically shutting down unauthorized users from downloading files or catching them in the act. So what does this mean for FTP, as it's one of the vulnerabilities for data breaches, and why is it so vulnerable? Well, for that, I'm going to ask Colin to help us understand FTP's vulnerabilities. Colin?
Thank you, Deb, and thank you for everyone for taking time out to attend our webinar today. Well, we all know that FTP is vulnerable, but what are the reasons that make FTP vulnerable? Well, read access is all that is required for a file to be FTP'd anywhere in the world. This vulnerability may have not been taken into consideration when access rules for sensitive data was originally developed. Once a file is downloaded, it can be transmitted outside of the corporate firewall, and all control of the data and its subsequent dissemination and exposure is permanently lost. Although most FTP servers have the ability to support secured connections, very few FTP transactions are actually secured. Unsecured FTP activity travels in clear text, exposing not only the data being transmitted, but also the logon credentials. Also, recent events have demonstrated that when data security is breached, it is not just the criminal who is the bad guy. The business and organization who had the security procedure breached are being held liable. Sensitive data being exposed and intercepted is one risk which needs to be prevented. Others include being hijacked upon, spied upon, as well as wireless connections that can circumvent firewalls. To show the vulnerability of FTP, let's take a look at a packet trace of a typical unsecured FTP session. Let's expand on trace record number 10. As you can see, the user's password and the data is clearly visible in this packet. This sniffer software is readily available on the internet, and anyone with a bit of know-how can perform these packet traces and gain access to this sensitive information. So, what are your options to make FTP a secure resource in your environment? Let us start peeling the onion together. I'm sure most of you are familiar with some of the solutions shown on your screen. Firewalls, VPN software, FTP, SFTP are all options available to make your FTP a secure resource. I'm going to hand it over to Tim Full, our Technical Services Manager, to discuss these options in greater detail. Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Colin, and welcome to everyone. Okay, so you don't really need to get your head around this picture completely yet, but this is a high-level view of what I intend to cover today. We'll be covering a lot of material quickly. What I hope to do is give you a flavor of some of the options available to you. Odds are that you might find a need for more than one solution depending on the specific needs of your multiple partners. So I'll give it a quick broad brush to make you aware of some of the ways to get it done. As Colin pointed out, although FTP is a well-known common application for moving data, it has a lot of technical baggage that makes it less than ideal for transferring data that is proprietary, confidential, or not really intended to be available to everyone in the world. The world as it existed when FTP was originally designed was a much smaller, safer world than it is today. Unfortunately, that just isn't the case anymore. With the advent and proliferation of the worldwide internet, the playing field has gotten much larger. It's provided us with a great wealth of opportunities. Unfortunately, few opportunities come without some cost. Privacy is normally one of the first casualties of accessibility. That is, unless you are willing to make the necessary adjustments to protect your data. So let's talk about some methods and tools commonly available to resolve the privacy problem. Each of the methods we'll be reviewing has its own set of benefits, but also has its own set of complications and limitations. So after a brief description of the concept, we'll have a look at the pros and cons of each solution. I know one of the things I'm always pleased to find when I'm researching possible solutions is an example, ideally very similar to what I'm trying to do that helps me relate the solution to my goal. We'll talk about some scenarios that can best leverage the benefits of each solution. This high-level diagram gives you a quick look at what alternatives I'll be talking about. Let's break it down a bit. First, we'll talk briefly about good old FTP and when it still fits the bill. Next, we'll move on to leveraging what you probably are familiar with and already have in place by exploring the FTPS protocol and how it might be used in the right environment. We'll continue by discussing some technologies that might make sense when you need to share data with your partners who are using a different platform. The third solution is taking advantage of FTP over an SSH encrypted tunnel. This is a bit of a hybrid, providing a bridge between what's already in place and the encryption features of the SSH protocol. Then we'll leave FTP behind for a moment and start talking about using the SFTP, or Secure FTP, protocol, which is an integrated part of an SSH environment. So you've already been investing in FTP for years. It's scattered throughout all your batch jobs, but the auditors say you have to start using SFTP. Now what? We'll revisit FTP and how you might be able to marry your investment to the new requirement with limited effort, without all the hassles of conversion, and without having to build all the bridges yourself. There are also some technologies that are not really specifically file transfer oriented, but might already be in place that provide the necessary security between you and trusted partners. We'll discuss virtual private networks, or VPNs, and IPsec briefly. But data in motion might not be your only concern. Other options exist outside of encrypting data in transit. In particular, we'll be talking about protecting data before transmission and when that type of solution might be best implemented. Okay, time to simplify. All right, let's start with FTP. One of the biggest advantages to FTP is that it's already available in so many places. ZOS, Windows, Unix, Linux, you name it, usually comes with FTP ready to go. The client side is nearly always ready to go out of the box. The server side is usually pre-installed, just waiting for some configuration information and you'll be off and running. Since it's been so readily available for so long, you're probably already pretty exposed to FTP. It's pretty simple to use, follows some common prototypes we're already familiar with, and has a nice basic syntax for the fundamentals. In addition, since it's been the de facto standard for so long, and no one wants to be left out, it usually comes with appropriate extensions to make it work well on the platform that it's delivered with. For example, the ZOS FTP server and client handle MVS datasets without skipping a beat. EBCDIC to ASCII conversion is ready to go. Even JES support is available for submission of jobs and extraction of reports. But as Colin indicated earlier, FTP doesn't handle privacy and security very well. FTP is a clear text protocol. Any eavesdroppers on the line can see user IDs, passwords, the data files themselves. In a closed, secure environment, that can save a lot of hassles. But that type of inherent guarantee is more the exception than the rule in today's network environments. To address the issues, there have already been lots of network precautions taken, such as firewalls. Firewalls are intended to let the safe traffic pass while blocking suspect connections. Good plan, but difficult to implement, particularly when it comes to FTP. This diagram gives a basic idea of what a standard active FTP session might look like. The client requests a connection to the server on the command session, and the server opens a data connection as necessary to transfer data between the partners. The FTP protocol was designed around a trusting relationship. Both participants in the communication were oblivious to the rest of the world. But as the world got to be a more open, less safe place, precautions were put in place. A conventional approach was to place a firewall between the intranet and the rest of the world. Those on the inside were trusted, so were given permission to talk to whoever they liked, but those on the outside were not permitted to start the conversation with someone on the inside. That caused a problem for an active FTP session. So what happened was the initial command connection would work fine, but when a transfer started, the firewall would block the new connection coming in from the outside. So passive mode was added to help deal with the security problem. In passive mode, the client would indicate its intention to the server. If the FTP server was configured to support passive mode, the server would start a listener on an ephemeral port, which is a dynamic port grabbed from a pool of available ports, and pass the port number to the client on the command connection. The client could then initiate the second data connection, satisfying the firewall requirements, and would allow the transfer to work. Basic firewall setup was now working, but sometimes this basic setup was not as secure as might be desirable. Limiting access to the outside world can be desirable for businesses in many cases. This could cause a problem for the second connection on the ephemeral port, which was not one of the well-defined acceptable ports to the firewall. So the firewalls were enhanced to sniff the port number being passed on the command connection to provide temporary access from that particular host to get the data connection working. Okay, so another Band-Aid was added to fix the boo-boo. But this will become a problem in a moment when we start talking about FTPS. Before we get into FTPS, let's wrap up some of the other shortcomings of native FTP. FTP did not make any concessions for improved network performance. Compression was not native to the FTP protocol. There is a Mode Z extension that is available in some implementations, but you can't count on it being available. FTP also did not provide any application-level checksum to verify the integrity of the data. It relied on the TCP checksum, which provided some minimal checking, but was easily fooled. For example, a transposition of the bytes in a packet could provide an identical checksum, fooling the integrity check. Network reliability has come a long way, but it is still not flawless. If you need to know that the data was transmitted accurately, FTP does not provide the level of confidence that you might desire. FTP can still be used when privacy and integrity are less important than easy access. For example, if the data is public and there's some room for inaccuracy, FTP might make good sense. Since FTP is familiar and already available in most cases, it can be used effectively. You might want to consider its usage whenever what I'll call an anonymous test would be deemed appropriate. First of all, anonymous access would indicate little need for confidentiality and a limited need for accuracy. Second, anonymous also means authentication is not important. Keep in mind that native FTP means not only data, but also user IDs and passwords are being sent in the clear, so anyone sniffing the traffic might be able to get access to information that you might consider confidential. You may also want to use it on the intranet because it's already available and well known. But keep in mind that user IDs and passwords are easily sniffed using tools that are freely available on the internet. A quick internet search for data theft by employees might be an eye-opener. Statistics as high as 80% of data theft is being perpetrated by employees can easily be found. Intranet or internet, I'd still consider using the anonymous test that we just talked about before using FTP. So in the end, far too many things are being done via FTP, and a review of what is really going on is very often the best place to start. Okay, so let's move on to a twist on FTP. FTP over SSL is very similar to native FTP. The syntax is the same. The protocol is the same. With a bit of configuration, encryption can be added to what we've already come to know and love. In the ZOS arena, FTPS is already part of the base FTP offering you already have installed. They both provide some nice ZOS-specific features, such as MVS dataset support, JES support, and SMF reporting of some key events. FTPS also accommodates X.509 certificates and Kerberos. Services from outside parties such as VeriSign, Equifax, and several other vendors can do the verification work to make sure that the person at the other end of the conversation is who they say they are. And since the server and client were designed to work with ZOS, use of RACF keyrings is available for management of certificates. Okay, that all sounds great. It has lots of features that you might be looking for, but what's the downside? Well, I mentioned earlier when we were discussing FTP and firewalls that encryption adds a bit of a problem to the workaround of passive FTP. Remember how the server passed the port to connect back to the server on the command connection, and how the firewall might sniff that to provide temporary dynamic access to the client? Well, now that data on the command connection is encrypted, so the firewall can't sniff it anymore. Even though there are FTPS servers and clients available on most platforms, they're not as likely to be configured and active everywhere. When does FTPS really make good sense? Well, FTP over SSL is a great candidate for transferring between LPARs and a sysplex. Usually there isn't a firewall between them. The data could still be sniffed, however, even if it's over hypersockets, but it's less likely. But by using FTPS, you can protect yourself against sniffers. The I-Series also is commonly loaded with an FTPS server and client, and so that is another good possibility. And it's not uncommon for the Z-Series and the I-Series systems to live close together, so firewalls might not be in play. Other platforms might have the functionality available, but the further apart the partners are, the more likely there will be firewalls that need to be configured to allow the multi-connection traffic. Okay, so now let's start talking about using a different encryption mechanism other than SSL. SSH is similar technology that can also provide the confidentiality, authentication, and integrity asked for of encryption. And the FTP you already have in place can take an easy advantage of the encryption tunnel. It's also much more firewall friendly. An SSH tunnel only requires a single connection, usually on port 22. The connection can actually carry multiple tunnels simultaneously and deals with the multiplexing of getting the right data from each tunnel to the right application. So what happens is the command connection and the data connection are multiplexed in the same SSH encrypted connection. So now there's no more secondary connections coming in from the wrong side of the firewall. SSH also compresses the data as it encrypts it, so you get the benefit of the reduced bandwidth. Of course, the security and savings of bandwidth comes at the cost of CPU, but if you have a crypto processor, you might be able to offload that too. Some technologies will also take advantages of ZAPs, ZIPs, and IFL processors as well. SSH also has a more sophisticated checksum process that is less likely to be fooled, so you can have more confidence that the network won't corrupt the data without you knowing about it. Another good solution if everything is in place, but this usually requires some coordination between the partners to make sure it's all there. For example, both FTP and SSH are required on both ends. FTP clients are usually there, but servers may not be. Linux and Unix admins have come to rely on SSH and its SFTP subsystem to move files around. They regularly do not have an FTP server running. First, there might not have been any need for it before. Second, FTP would require another port to be opened up. That opens up another potential exposure to intruders. This can be a good solution, though, if all the pieces are in place. You can leverage that which is already implemented in your environment with little to no modifications of the batch jobs. In some cases, though, you'll find resistance to loading the back-end FTP server on the partner's platform, so you may need to implement a vanilla SFTP transfer. First, SFTP as well as FTPS and FTP via an SSH tunnel provide encryption from the client to the server end-to-end, so this is not unique to this solution. But before we go on, I'd like to clarify a bit about SFTP. SFTP is not the encryption engine. It's a subsystem of an SSH server. It's the SSH component that is responsible for encryption. SSH can encrypt lots of kinds of traffic, including telnet, file transfers, and just about any other kind of TCP traffic you want. SFTP simply is the add-on that makes file transfers more convenient to run through the SSH tunnel. Since SFTP is using SSH, and SSH is already providing the compression and integrity checking inherent in the encryption, SFTP is able to take full advantage of both. One of the biggest advantages of SFTP is that it is semi-ubiquitous. I say semi-ubiquitous because it's almost always available on Unix and Linux platforms, but not so much on ZOS and Windows. You'll generally have to install something on these platforms to add the support. There are free solutions and for-a-fee solutions. The free solutions will get you part of the way there, but there are usually some significant limitations involved. Base SFTP does not provide EBCDIC to ASCII translation. Some of the SSH offerings available for ZOS have extensions to add this type of support. In addition, access to MVS datasets, the JES-Q, and other ZOS-specific features are usually desirable. Ability to offload encryption to the crypto processor is another feature that can be important. Fortunately, these are available in the for-a-fee solutions, so you'll want to review what your needs are before deciding on the right solution for your environment. So what else do you need to be aware of? Well, the SFTP syntax is similar, but not the same as FTP, so there is a bit of re-educating that might be in order. All of the solutions we've discussed thus far are only designed to protect your data while in transit between sites, but once it reaches the other end, the data might be a free-for-all. Later, we'll discuss some options if you are looking for more protection beyond transmission. If you're interested in disseminating data to your Linux farm, or your partners are using Linux or Unix, this might be a great option for you. What we hear from a lot of our customers we talk to is that they've been told that they need to stop using FTP and start using SFTP, and that's about all the direction they've been given. If the real goal is encryption, any of the previous solutions should suffice, other than plain FTP, that is, of course. But if the goal truly is implementing SFTP, then this solution might be necessary. However, there may be another solution that will help you make the conversion from FTP to SFTP more painless. The FTP A solution provides a bit of a trick to build the bridge to ease the FTP to SFTP conversion. It involves an FTP to SFTP proxy. The FTP commands get routed to this proxy and are converted to SFTP commands, allowing you to communicate with your partner's SSH SFTP server natively. The network portion is really SFTP. But your client jobs are really still using FTP. You just need to configure the FTP steps to use the proxy. This can be done with a simple JCL modification. There are even tools that can ease the JCL changes for you. Colin will briefly discuss some of the tools available in a bit. Just a reminder, though, that FTP and SFTP are not 100% compatible, so not everything can be handled automatically. But basic FTP functions generally make the transition pretty easily. So if you have a big investment in FTP in place, and a conversion to native SFTP will be a major undertaking, this might be the best solution for you. VPNs might already be in place to allow you to get your data transferred from one site to another safely. If it's already there and is satisfying the need, you probably wouldn't be listening to this webinar, though. I wanted to simply mention it because it might play a part in your overall strategy. VPNs are commonly set up between two networks to encrypt all the data between them. They are also commonly used between the network and a host, perhaps from a home office environment. VPNs provide lots of flexibility in what you can get access to, but easy access also means either more administration or less control, but it can be a great solution for the right problem. Since VPNs encrypt data, integrity is a usual good side effect. Also, some VPN software can provide compression. It's not always there, however. Since VPNs are implemented at a lower level of the IP stack, applications won't really need to know anything about it and make special accommodations for the encryption. Unfortunately, VPNs are not usually a good choice for ad hoc connections. If you need to make occasional secure connections to some of your partners, one of the other technologies might be a better choice for that. In addition, when the VPN is implemented at the firewall, that's where the encryption ends. Traffic over the intranet is still unprotected. I discussed that concern earlier. I'm not sure if this is a pro or con, but VPNs are generally managed by the network group, so it might be something that can be offloaded, or it might be something that's outside your control. It kind of depends upon your point of view as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Since VPNs are not easily set up on the fly, they are usually limited to persistent partnerships. All right, so there's one more solution that I'd like to review. It's different than everything else we've discussed and can be really a good option, particularly when the data involved is of a highly confidential nature. If you pre-encrypt the data, it'll be protected in transit, but will also be protected at the destination. Only those with the proper credentials can extract the data. Since encryption is already handled, any transport will do. As a matter of fact, good old FTP might be a good choice again. If you go that route, though, remember that the authentication of the FTP control session would be in plain text again. But since the data is already encrypted and can be protected by access at the other end by requiring the proper credentials after transfer, and an anonymous FTP session can be used to safely transmit the data and still protect it from prying eyes anywhere along its path. PGP also provides the compression and integrity that can be so important, particularly in larger files. But the other thing you might consider is that PGP isn't just for network transfer. It can also be used even if the data doesn't move at all. For example, you might encrypt the file for archival and delete the original. Just make sure you keep track of the necessary credentials to decrypt the file, or you might be in trouble later when you need to get the data back. Oh yeah, and what about those little USB thumb drives? Well, if the data was encrypted on the thumb drive and it gets misplaced, you'll still be able to sleep at night. The pre-encrypting, though, means that the data does need to go through a bit of staging. But once you've introduced it into your batch jobs and processes, that step can be as transparent as anything else. So as I mentioned, this can be a really good solution when you're concerned about more than just prying eyes on the internet. So PGP can be useful for encryption even when network transfers aren't involved. But in some cases, the network is involved, but controlling the network is outside your domain. Firewall admins can sometimes be a little finicky about allowing traffic they're not comfortable with, or they might find other tasks that are of higher priority than yours, at least in their eyes. Since PGP can be used over any transport, you can now get control of your data over the network again. Okay, so hopefully this mess isn't quite as confusing anymore. We discussed lots of possibilities, and the reality is that it's not that likely that any one of these solutions will solve all your needs. You'll probably be coming up with a mixture of different solutions. Finding the right technical partners to help identify the problem and what solutions fit your specific puzzle best can save you lots of time and your company lots of money. SDS is here to help you get a grip on your particular onion. We can provide you with the expertise and tools to help you get the job done. So what's next? Colin is going to give you an idea of what we might suggest is a prudent approach and talk about some tools available to help you peel your onion. Take it away, Colin.
Thank you very much, Tim, for that great explanation on the options available to customers. We have presented you with a number of solutions, but you may say to us, okay, you have presented me with all of these great solutions. What now? How do I go about making FTP compliant at my shop? Let's discuss the steps you need to set the wheels in motion. So, how big is this onion that you're trying to unravel anyway? What are you up against? Do you have a feel for the mix of FTP traffic flows on your network? Well, you need to get a handle on your FTP traffic, and you will need to identify all of your secure and unsecure FTP traffic. In short, you need visibility before you can attempt to peel this onion. It is quite amazing how many times when we are in discussion with customers that they openly admit they have no idea what FTP is occurring in their environments. Do you know who is sending files into your mainframe? Do you know who is sending files from your mainframe? Do you know what files they are? Are these authorized users to send and receive these files? Do you know what FTP is being invoked in batch programs? These are all questions that you need to ask yourself. Let me show you how VFTP can assist you in answering some of these questions. VFTP out of the box comes with a number of standard queries that is almost certain to answer some of the questions asked in this webinar. On the left of your screen are all of the standard queries that come with VFTP. In addition to the standard queries, users can set up their own queries, which can allow users to be more granular for the information they wish to view. An example of a query that a user may want to set up would be a query on remote IP address that match a particular IP address or subnet and show only FTP transfers that are using unsecure FTP. The query that you can see on your screen at the moment is called the Protection Mechanism query. This is a great query to see the breakdown of the different FTP traffic types in your environment. Here I've chosen to show the breakdown of FTP traffic for the past 7 days, and as can be seen, we have to peel the onion here at SDS because there looks like there is a significant amount of unsecure FTP. This is really how simple it is to gain visibility on FTP in your environment. Select an appropriate date and time and run the query. Completed FTP transfers are retained in the VFTP database, and users can use the calendar function on VFTP to go back to a specific date and time to view completed FTP transfers. Here I've opted to run a query only showing unsecure FTP traffic, and I've also selected the Details tab, which provides me with all of the technical detail on this FTP transfer. Information like start and end time, file name, file type, user ID of transfer, remote IP transfer of this particular transfer, and if this transfer was successful or not, are but a few of the technical information contained on the Details tab. This is the same transfer, but now I have selected to view the session log detail. With the VFTP client wrap in place, you can retrieve the session log detail on all FTP transfers. All of your information is at your fingertips, and you don't have to go scour logs or view batch jobs to get to the log detail. Just point and click, and you get to the information you are looking for. Here is a customized query that I've customized to my specific requirements. When I set up this query, I elected to view all of the FTP batch jobs that begin with the qualifier FTP star. And in addition to the suite of batch jobs, I've asked VFTP to show me all of the FTP transfers that is using unsecure FTP. In a large customer environment where FTP is being invoked in hundreds or if not thousands of batch jobs, this could be a great transfer to run to identify a particular suite of batch jobs. You can use this query as a favorite, or shall I say you can save this query as a favorite on your favorites tabs for easy access to run this query again. You will also notice the 3D pie chart in the bottom portion of your screen, which breaks down the traffic for you in a graphical format. You can choose which transfers to plot and also how you'd like to view the information. For example, a line chart, a bar chart, and you have 16 different types of formats to choose from. The Remote IP Transfer tab will show you all of the FTP activity from a remote IP point of view. Now, this query could be a real eye-opener for customers, and this could show you what is happening on your network. I know this particular query assisted one of our customers to identify almost 1 terabyte of FTP transfers that they were not aware of. What I've chosen to do on this query is to only show unsecured transfers from the 192 subnet. This is an easy way of identifying transfers from a particular segment of your network. Okay, once you have identified the mix of FTP traffic in your environment, what is next? You have to decide what solution fits your company best. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Ask yourself the question, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? With that in mind, implement an appropriate solution. Tim did an excellent job on presenting you with some of the solutions and the pros and cons of each solution. Detailed discussions and planning is required to find the correct solution that is right for your company. You may find that you have to implement more than one of the solutions presented today to meet your requirements. I think after today's webinar, you will have a better idea on the options available to you. If you're still uncertain which solution is the right one for you, give us a call. We will be happy to discuss your environment needs and offer some advice. Customers ask us the question all the time, how can I make this migration or this transition fast and easy with the least amount of headache? Picture the look on your developer's face when you tell him that he needs to change all of his batch JSON to start using SFTP. Having to implement a secure FTP solution without having to make any batch JSON changes, that is priceless. Let me show you how. VFTP implements SSH Tunneling for file transfers from ZOS FTP clients. VFTP clients can direct ZOS clients to alternate configuration files, causing the ZOS client to send encrypted data through SSH tunnels. Controls for this feature are provided by fields in the VFTP agent configuration panel and by this FTP client configuration panel, which you are viewing at the moment. This client configuration panel defines selection criteria for ZOS batch jobs and specifies how the FTP client will handle the traffic generated by specific jobs. The rules are a named set of values for the filter criteria and job actions. When a ZOS batch job sends the traffic to the ZOS FTP client, the VFTP agent applies these rules to determine how the client will handle that traffic. As a security measure, a VFTP agent can direct the FTP client to transfer data through the SOCKS proxy. Such data will be encrypted and travel through an SSH tunnel. In this example, I'm instructing the VFTP client to send all batch that match FTP GL star to be forced across the TechTier SSH tunnel. No JCL changes is required and in existing FTP batch processes. With our exits in place, we get control when FTP is invoked, and VFTP can force these batch jobs across the SSH tunnel. There are various other options that can be selected from this panel. For example, retry connect failures or send an email to a user or a group of users to notify them when the FTP transfer has completed. This is really how easy it is to migrate unsecure FTP transfers across a TechTier SSH tunnel. Step 4 is ensuring that you maintain compliancy. Unfortunately, once you have implemented a secure FTP solution, you cannot assume the job is done and turn the blind eye to FTP transfers. Well, what do we have to do? Conduct audits on FTP activity is an ongoing process and needs to be conducted regularly in customer environments. Compliance is more than just reports. Although most FTP servers have the ability to log FTP activity, and there are hundreds of different servers available across the various computing platforms, logging isn't often turned on by default. In most cases, an administrator needs to enable logging on FTP servers. Ensuring that all FTP usage is being logged and archived is a critical part of proper FTP management. In the event of an FTP-based breach of sensitive data, knowing what data was breached, when it was breached, who breached it, and where it was transmitted will be an important part of the discovery process your organization will be required to perform. More importantly, if FTP activity logs are proactively monitored and audited, your organization may be able to identify FTP security issues before they result in a breach. VFTP can assist you in making sure that no unsecure FTP transfers are slipping through the cracks, so to speak. The VFTP activity summary can provide you details on all of the FTP activity in your site. As can be seen, it keeps track of all the different types of FTP activity, and the information provided on this screen can assist you to make sure that all is well in your environment. Hopefully, no more tears. I'm now going to hand it over to Deb Hodson to wrap up this webinar.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Colin. So what's next? The first thing to ask yourself, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? As you've seen, it's not simple just to say we need to use SFTP or we need to encrypt files for our partners. And like you're doing today, you're doing your homework, you're researching your options. Consider the layers and the options that Tim talked about, and choose the option that makes the most sense given your problem and your environment. Whether you need to send encrypted payroll files to your partner and simply use a PGP-type product, or you also need SFTP transmission with your customers or partners. We've assisted many, many customers through this process to figure out what's best for their company. We're happy to schedule a one-on-one free consultation. If you're interested, please contact us at www.sdsusa.com.
And now I just had to end on kind of a humorous note. Our hope is that we've taken this complex and sometimes smelly FTP onion and made it not a tearful endeavor for you to peel, but one that you can embrace and maybe even find some humor. Thanks again for your time. We appreciate it.